for the Drum Talk today, and today my guest is Jim Wagy from Kansas City, Missouri. Can you tell he's got a little Kansas City thing on his shirt right there? Chiefs, go Chiefs.
That's right, go Chiefs. Hey, it's Jim here with Freedom Music Factory. It's an honor for me to be here with Earldrum today. We've been friends for several years, and Earl is really my YouTube mentor. So I want to say special shout out to Earldrum, okay, because I saw Earl doing daily videos, daily drum covers. Every day he'd be waking me up at 5 in the morning with some new cool song he was doing. And I was like, this guy... who is this guy that can get up every day and do a drum video? Jim, why can't you get up and do anything? So I said, if Earl can do one a day, I can do one a week. Or I could do, one, maybe 2 a week. And so my channel, Freedom Music Factory, has been doing very well. But it's really because Earl inspired me. So Earl, thanks for all that. Thanks for your friendship. And just thank you for everything you've done for the drumming community.
Well, and thank you for coming today. Mm-hmm. He's in town visiting family and stuff, and I thought it's great that we could just come here and sit in the studio and chat a little bit. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about early influences, how we got started, because I'm a little older. I don't get to say that very often, by the way. I usually say I'm a little younger, but I'll be the older guy today. It's important, I could probably have more grandkids than you.
Somebody should.
Yeah. I'll be the older guy in the room. But we're going to talk about our early influences, how we got into drumming, our love for CCM music, because we both have a CCM background. We both played in churches for years. Mm-hmm. And Jim's Freedom Music Factory, his focus of his channel is on the music that he's written. You've written over 200 and how many songs?
60.
260 songs he's written. And he's only shared probably 10 of them, tops?
Maybe
on
30
covers.
30
covers. 30 covers. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, to actually look at Jim's channel and watch it, you're watching Jim's original music, which is pretty cool to watch. And he uses some of the great musicians in the world. We'll get to that at the end. Mm-hmm. But we're going to talk about the early stuff first, and then we'll work our way towards, where we're at today and what we're doing. So, Jim, what was your earliest influence as a drummer? What got you into wanting to be a drummer?
Very good question. Very easy answer. Okay, here's what it was. I was a little lad, and my cousin, David Castleberry, was in Wichita, Kansas, so he went to visit him. And he had a Ludwig red Vistalite kit, and he played the theme to Hawaii 5-0, the Ventures version. Right. All the fast 16ths or 30 seconds, depending upon how you count it. All the big tom fills. And it was all over. Game off. I have to play drums. So I said, Mom, I got to play drums. I just want to be like David. And, David was older than me, and he was a great player, pretty well known in Wichita area. And so my mom and dad didn't want to hear all the racket. Mm-hmm. And so they said, why don't you take piano lessons for a year? So I took piano lessons for a year.
That was good, though.
Yeah, I was. And so I did that and, read music and all that. And so then after a year, I went to my mom and I said, well, Mom, it's been a year. And I really want to play the drums. So they got me a little small $25 drum kit, and it was, cymbal had a big cut of V out of it, it was just a really old drum set. And I started on that, and then they saw that I was serious, so they put me in private lessons. I went through, Here's the Drum, Volume 1, Haskell Horror Book 2, John Pratt's 14 Modern Drum Contest solos, and all the Mitch Markovich stuff, and all that stuff. So we went through all that stuff, and they kept graduating me to better and better teachers. And we had a lot of great drum teachers in Kansas City. And so I very well educated and, drum corps, everything else. And so that was my earliest thing on drums. But I mean, I've been...
So you did drum corps too?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which...
Well, I was in Skyriders for a minute, and I didn't actually march with them on the final because I had all my lessons and I was teaching, and I didn't want to give up all my students for the summer, but I went out for the camp.
Well, that's cool. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Drum corps, that's a whole different vibe. I did marching band in school, but I never did the drum corps thing. So, but I knew a guy. I had some friends in college that did the thing. Did you go to college for business or?
Yes. So I went. So we had a college in St. Joe that was cranking out crazy talented drummers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they'd have 30 drummers in their section every year,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing traditional band marching. But I mean, great. Dennis Rogers was one of my teachers and just a great, great educator in Kansas City. And so he would just year after year have just great crops of drummers. So I followed them all up there thinking, well, I want to be a drummer. And so I did. And when I was up there, I'd already been studying all the percussion, the timpani, the mallets, tested through my piano, went through the brass classes and all that stuff, music theory. And I saw the drummers, the upperclassmen ahead of me, and they were all going to student teach. They were like, well, I'm going to be gone for 8 weeks, and I'm going to be teaching 5th grade band here.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go direct a 7th grade band. I go, what's going on here? I followed you because you're a drummer, man.
Right.
And I go, what am I going to school for?
I don't want to be a teacher.
You're right. I don't want. I mean, I taught drum lessons for years.
Right.
I liked teaching private drum lessons.
Right.
And I did it full time for a long time. But I didn't want to be a band director or a choir director.
I get it. I totally understand it. I mean, I went to college. I got a music degree, and I came at it with my music degree, and I met the love of my life my last semester of college, and we got married, and I needed a job. I ended up in the cable industry. And then one day what got me my job in training and safety was they were looking for a technical trainer, and they wanted somebody that had a background of 6 years of cable experience, but they also wanted somebody that had at least an associate's degree, and I had a BA. So I was talking to the ops guy, and I said, well, I've got a BA in music. I was going to be a music teacher. He goes, well, we need a guy like you to come in because you've already got the knowledge of the 6 years of understanding how the business works from a technical perspective. That's how I got my job into training. And then once I learned training, I realized I can't teach people how to climb a ladder unless they know the safest way to do it. So I went to Bell Pole Climbing School, and I learned the safety side of it.
Wow.
And that became my career. So I thought I was going to be a musician too, but when you got a wife and 3 kids, it's a little hard to be a rock star. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot on the line you roll. So did you ever have a point in time in your career where you thought, I want to make it as a musician? Or when did that change for you?
Yeah, I left college and I went and played in a top 40 band, and we were playing all over the East Coast. And, it was the 80s, and there's a lot of cocaine, and there's a lot of stuff going on that I didn't believe in. I've never actually smoked. I've never done a drug. I've never drank alcohol. So I'm kind of really different that way. And so I just committed that I wasn't going to do it. And actually, the reason I've never done it was because I was so busy practicing in high school. These drums were my friend. Yeah. They were my companion, and they kept me out of trouble. So I was practicing all the time. I didn't have time to get in trouble. They said, what, idle's the devil's favorite playground, idle time, right? So I kept practicing. And so when I made it through high school without drinking, I went to college, and I thought, well, why should I start now? I mean, because I made it all this way. And again, I was teaching drum lessons while I was in college, driving back and commuting to a music studio, and still doing college. And I didn't have time to get in any mischief because I was practicing all my instruments.
Sure.
And so, I went out and played in a band, but there's just some things that I just couldn't put up with. And so I basically then decided I'd rather make music because I wanted to, not because I had to.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about making music because you want to versus having to, which takes the whole fun out of music. Just the day gig always is the day gig, you know what I mean? So
it's interesting. I deal with a lot of professional musicians and hire a lot of professional musicians. I'm like, listen to my song, man, check this out. And they don't want to listen to the song because they've been doing music all day. They want to escape and do their thing.
Yeah.
And my passion all of a sudden is like, I'm trying to share my passion with them because I'm working all day doing other stuff. And then all of a sudden, a lot of people, their ears are shot and they're like, I'm done.
Yeah, you're right about that. It's kind of funny how that actually works, I know a lot of musicians like that too. So let's talk about the early influences of CCM. When did you get into doing CCM music?
Well, okay, so I grew up in church, gave my heart to the Lord when I was in 7th grade. And then there were all these hellfire and brimstone preachers out there talking about how bad rock and roll music was. So I had Kansas, I had Led Zeppelin, I had Kiss, I had Leonard Skinner, I had Boston, I decided I guess I'm an all in or all out kind of guy.
Did you get rid of all your
I got rid of all my
My
albums.
wife did that. I did not do that. So
It was a thing, man. It was a thing in the 70s and 80s.
I never did that.
I've since bought them back on CD and vinyl. So anyway, but anyway, you know, God looks at our heart. God knows our heart. And so, I mean, that's what really all that matters. But, you know, that was the thing. And so I did. So I decided to throw myself in CCM music.
Right.
And my you know, of course, Phil Kagi, who's a friend of mine now and has played on some of my music. He was such a great influence. And, man, I loved the second chapter of Acts. And then, but I really loved the best band was a Sweet Comfort band for me. I mean, Brian Duncan, Kevin Thompson, his brother, Randy Thomas, and then his brother on bass. The Sweet Comfort band was it, man. They had the horns, they had everything. They were doing all that Sea Wind type stuff.
That's how I got introduced to Sea Wind. Was I had bought the Breaking the Ice album, and actually my friend in college, he had it. He was the one who got me my first album, which was Phil Kagi's Love Broke Through.
Right.
And then he came in with Breaking the Ice, and he goes, "Listen to this." And I was like so blown away by the horns. I said, "Well, who are these horn players?" It said Sea Wind horns. I said, I got to find Sea Wind. So I went to the record store and found Sea Wind. Got the Blue album and the Window of a Child album, and then I got Light the Light.
Yeah. And
I was hooked on Sea Wind because I'm a Chicago guy.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
that's what drew me to music was, you know, Hal Blaine playing on the Partridge Family and the Carpenters somehow, early influence of mine. And then Danny Serafin with Chicago. So I was really into horn bands. And when I heard Sweet Comfort Band and I heard Breaking the Ice, it was kind of like, wow, this is cool. And then I found Sea Wind and I was like, okay, now this is even cooler. So then I got into Sea Wind, you know. And Sea Wind, of course, you go from Sea Wind in Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I also had a path with a good friend of mine who brought me the whole Tower. Tower Power thing. So I'm like, I got all these horn bands that I love.
And don't forget Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
I don't forget Blood. You know, they're definitely part of it. But I could play the second album. I had it down when I was a kid. At least I thought I had it down. I've learned in doing drum covers that I didn't have any of that stuff down.
Yeah, well, you got to be you. You know, that's important when you play too.
Yeah, and you know, I think the funny thing about drumming is that all these drummers have had an influence on our playing. So I have a hard time playing Chicago songs exactly like Danny played. Nobody can play like Danny played. It's like trying to play like Steve Gadd plays 50 Ways. We all have our little way of doing 50 Ways, but we're not Steve Gadd, so it's never going to sound exactly like Steve Gadd.
Right.
You know, I don't care who it is.
Right.
Steve is Steve. You know.
He is. He's got his own. No one can sound like me.
Exactly.
I mean, we all have our nuances and our touch and our feel that gives us part of our sound. The way we tune the drums, the way we hit the drum, the way we approach the drum, the way we touch the drum.
What was your first drum kit? Not the little one, the first real drum kit.
Okay, the first one was probably a Tempo Silver Sparkle 4-piece kit, you know.
Okay, so it was like a made in Japan type kit.
Yeah. But then
when did you get the real one?
The real one was the white Cortex Ludwig 5-piece.
I thought I saw a picture of you on that. I mean, white Cortex, was it double-headed?
Yes.
Yeah.
But during the 70s, we had S-clamps, and the S-clamps held the bottom rims on, so it looked like there was a head on it, but there were one-ply heads, because that was the thing, you know. You put a pinstripe on, you put your duct tape on your toilet paper, and you played one-ply drums on a double-headed drum.
Yeah.
But I did both, actually.
Interesting. So white Cortex 12, 13, 16?
Yeah. And then
22-inch kick?
Yeah, and then you know, my drum instructor, Dennis Rogers, was making intricate drum solos, 30-second notes, 30-second note triplets, just orchestrating these drum, and you had to read it all. And the drum sets kept getting bigger. So eventually he wrote a double bass song. It was a 12-page double bass thing. So I had to get the extra bass drum. Then he did another song called Groovistic Funk. These are charted out drum solos that you would take to a state contest or perform at a senior recital.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so that was 8 and 10 episodes. Eventually it turned out that Earl, I had the whole octopus.
Yeah, I thought I saw a kit where you had some concert toms on it.
Yeah.
So But the funny thing was, my first kit was a Ludwig Acrolite kit, blue. It was 12, 13, 16, and I eventually added the 8 and the 10. And then I went to college, and I brought my blue Acrolite snare drum in, and everybody just kind of laughed at me. I had a Panasonic head on it, and they were kind of like, "That's really not cool for."
But it was cool. You were cool, Earl.
It was not cool. So that first semester, that first year of college, I was kind of like, I got this blue Acrolite kit. It's just not cool, and everybody kept going, "You got to get different drums." So that summer, I worked my tail off that summer, and I told my mom, "I'm not saving this money for school. I'm buying a set of drums." And I went to New York, Ippolito's drum shop. It was Frank Ippolito's drum shop, and I bought this Gretsch kit. Of course, it didn't have rims mounts at the time, but it had pearl mounts put in because they would refuse to sell me the Gretsch hardware. They said, "We will not put the Gretsch hardware on it because it's terrible." It was the old stuff. The stuff used to go through the.
Yeah.
But we'll put this pearl stuff on it for you. And they did that. And I bought a 12, 13, 14, 16, and then eventually got a 10, and eventually got an 8 for this kit. But this is still my college kit. I still own it.
Sounds great. He's got these ambassadors, white coated ambassadors. They sound really great on it. So yeah, just talking about, I can't leave out Andre Crouch, man. I'm such a huge gospel guy. And I got to see Andre Crouch with Sweet Comfort at one concert. They were both touring together.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw Sweet Comfort many times, but Andre Crouch too. And Andre Crouch is writing, and Bill Maxwell on drums, and Hadley Hawkins Smith, and everybody in that band. Oh, Tata Vega singing, his sister Sandra, tambourine. I mean, I just love Andre Crouch, and I write a lot of gospel music today in the style of like Andre and CeCe Winans, anything Winans. It all comes from that upbringing.
Oh yeah, and Bill was big influence on the Winans too. He produced all those albums.
Yeah.
Bill Maxwell's a huge drummer, CCM drummer influence, I would say. For me too. He played on Keith Green, Andre Crouch, Second Chapter, and then of course Koinonia. So I mean,
Helen Baylor, he produced all her gospel stuff.
Oh yeah, he did. Some great stuff there too. Yeah, Bill Maxwell is definitely one of my CCM drummer influences. Him and Paul Lime, of course.
You're right. Paul Lime's great.
Paul Lime played on so much stuff. So.
Medals. And then I got to meet John Hammond when he was playing the Walls of Glass tour for Russ Taff. He came through Kansas City, and he was just a young lad. I think he was on a red recording kit with the Zildjian cymbals. And John and I are really good friends today. Shout out to you, John Hammond. I know you know him too.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, he replaced me on an album. That's how I know John Hammond.
And he's not bitter about it at all.
I'm not bitter at all about it. I'm not. We've had conversations. Last time I saw him with Amy, and we hugged.
Yeah.
So yeah.
John's a great guy, great
guy.
drummer. Played in Tim Akers in the smoking section, and just plays with Amy Grant and a lot of people now. Tim Akers is a great friend of mine. He was really kind of my angel in Nashville. That kind of took me. And got me introduced to everybody there where I make a lot of my music.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's talk about your music a little bit. I said we would eventually get to that aspect of this. So when did you start writing CCM songs, and what inspired you to start? When did you start the whole idea of producing your songs?
Well, see, as a drummer, and all these written out drum solos, 7 measures first inning, 7 measures second inning, B section.
Right.
I kind of learned composition, even playing drum corps.
Right.
There's first inning codas, and so I always kind of thinking about composition just that way. And so really what really happened was I lost my dad 20 years ago this month, and it seems like I'd started, I'd always dabbled with composition. I wrote my own drum solos. I wrote my own snare drum solos, performed them. Other people performed them. My students performed them. They played them at state contests and stuff like that. And so I'd done that, but after I lost my dad, it broke my heart. And the Lord started downloading to me words and melodies.
Wow.
And he just gave me the gift of music. So he gave me a song, and I just started writing them down. And I'd already studied piano and mallets and theory and all that stuff. And I'm so well into rhythm, I could get the cadence of the lyrics. And so I could really I just knew how to fit the the lyrics. You know, you've heard some of my music.
Yeah.
It's very, very rhythmic and that sort of thing. So all my songs are really kind of approached from a drummer's point of view. Is like, I'm going to put a samba in the middle of a chorus because I haven't heard that done before in Christian music. And, you know, I'm playing, you know, Steve Gadd, Asia outro stuff and a song. I'm doing stuff like that. I'm putting that in the chorus. And I think it fits really well because it's, you know, just really designed around the music, and all the people that play on my music are really digging it. But I think the Lord just really gave me the gift of music, you know, and just knowing how to put a song together and knowing how to piece it together and writing the melodies and the words. And then I always work with somebody on the chords, you know, even though I played 4 mallets and stuff, you know, my chord changes probably wouldn't be as smooth as a keyboard player.
Right.
And so I'll work with them, and I'm in the room when I'm writing the song, and we're picking the chords out together and the changes.
Yeah. You know, my wife has a similar writing style because, you know, I produced my wife's album in 2005. And that's how I started the studio, by the way. The whole reason for having a recording studio was to record my wife's album, Toward the Lamb.
Okay.
Which you guys can find on my YouTube channel page. It's one of my featured things, is her whole album is there in YouTube. But it's also on Spotify and everywhere else. But we originally pressed 1,000 copies of it, and I did the album. I started my studio in New Jersey on ADATs, and then I went to Coral Springs, Florida for 4 years. We lived there, and I did her whole album in a bedroom, 11 by 11 bedroom. That's when I realized you don't need walls to record music anymore.
Right.
You just need a space, and you need to have the right recording gear. And that's when I got into Digital Performer and started learning how to do digital recording. And I did the whole album in the bedroom, basically, except for a couple songs. I took some tracks at a friend's studio. But that album, she wrote basically prayer songs from her, melodies, and we got a keyboard player to kind of find the chords, and then we built the tracks around it. So I know what you're doing, what you're going through. That was my first album I ever produced. I mean, I produced a couple things for a couple people, but this is the first album I ever produced. It was all her music, and I did all the editing. That's where I learned how to be an engineer, and all the things I'm doing today in drum covers came from that first album that I spent 4 years doing. It took me 4 years to do it. So
I started with Cakewalk DOS, then I went to Cakewalk Pro and VS 1680s, and then ADATs, and then after that, I started recording in studios my own songs. So I'd rent out a studio, and we were doing tape.
Right.
And so, you know, we'd mix down the console and make the moves, and there's, you know, and I said, well, man, I wrote a song for my mom and dad when my dad retired. So my dad did get to hear some of my music. I wrote him a song called I Honor You. And so I spent like $5,000 on it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, geez, what can I build a studio for in my house? Because
exactly,
I had a choir, I had all analog instruments, we played the whole thing. It's a whole deal. And the answer is a lot more than $5,000.
Well, your studio is, we can talk about your studio. Your studio is incredible.
Right.
I mean, but you're right. You can spend a lot of money on a studio, or you can spend a little bit of money. I mean, I got into the studio thing the end of the 1990s. So it was 99. I started building my studio with ADATs. And I realized how much you really needed all that other stuff to make ADATs sound good.
Right. Yeah.
And even early Digital Performer, you needed all that other stuff. I ended up mixing my wife's album in a studio in Coconut Creek with my good friend Steve Cruz. Who
For the Cruz family?
No. Not from the Cruz family, but
you know,
he is a Cruz family. Yeah. He is a Cruz family.
They were a great band.
Yeah, another good band. But he had a lot of the outboard gear, you know, that we put it through, the Avalons, the things you needed to kind of make it sweeter. And I learned a lot there. And then, of course, the last 20 years, now with UA audio, plugins and things like that.
Everything's in the box.
Everything's in the box, and you can get a great sound in the box. But back in the early 2000s, not so much. It took a lot more outboard gear. And I started investing on that kind of stuff, and microphones. I have some preamps for my stuff. I didn't show you that, but I'll show it to you before you leave. But you can spend a lot of money in studios. There's no doubt about it. And
yeah, but it's really been rewarding for me. Music's my passion. I've been, you know, I made a promise to myself that I would write, record, and produce 10 songs a year, every year for the rest of my life. And I've been smashing that goal. This year I did 30. And during COVID, over the 2 years of COVID, I did 70. And so, I mean, I worked in Nashville a lot because the Kansas City musicians were all locked down, but the Nashville musicians were like, hey, I lost all my gigs, I lost all my tours, I lost all my studio sessions. I'll take anything. So I came to Nashville and started working with a lot of people there, and they were so appreciative that, like, Jim, thank you so much, because I've got a kid in college and I don't have any income coming in right now. You don't know how bad I needed it. So I kind of look at making music also as giving back to the community of great musicians that I work with.
You know, and that's, people don't realize that that's really what this world's about. Like, I have a guy that does my landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
He's been doing it for the whole time I've lived here. But those guys, that's how they make their living.
Mm-hmm.
So hiring a carpenter, hiring a landscaper, hiring somebody to, if you need to get your house cleaned a couple times a year or whatever you want to do, or if it's every week, whatever you can afford, you're really giving back to the community. And that's really what we need to do. It's not about keeping it all and doing it all ourselves. Plus, when you can tap into the creative energy of guys like from Nashville, some of the guys that have played on your stuff from Nashville and LA are guys they've played on so many guys' albums and stuff. So
the Lord's really blessed me and given me favor with a lot of people. And, it's just one relationship at a time. It's one song at a time. It's one track at a time. And, it's just like, Tim started me out and like, hey, there's a wrong bass note here. Do you want me to send that over to Gary Lunn and have him fix it up? Yeah. Gary's recording on my songs. Now he records on almost all my songs. And I've worked with Nathan East and soon to be Abraham Laboriel, and Will Lee's been on some of my songs. So God's just kind of given me favor to, contact these guys and work with them. And I'm really having the time of my life making music.
That's awesome. It's awesome. Let's talk about one more thing before we wrap this thing up. Let's talk about, you've become a drum collector. Would you say that's true?
Everybody calls me a drum collector. I just like drums. I mean, I got a problem, but
Okay. Well, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
I have other friends that love collecting things. It's hard to do. It's going to be very hard for you to answer this question, I'm sure, because you've got so many different things you can choose. But what are your top 3 favorite drum kits that you have?
All right. So I absolutely love Yamaha drums. Okay. I keep going back to them. I own David Weckel's iconic red Yamaha recording customer kit.
There's a video on this, by the way.
Yeah, on the Freedom Music Factory. I bought that from Dave. And, the Chick Corea kit, the Buddy Rich Memorial Scholarship Concert, which I was at. I saw Gad, Vinny, and Weckel playing right there. I was right there. And that was an amazing night of drumming history. I got a video on that. But I love that kit, the recording custom, because of birch shells. I also love the Yamaha Absolute Hybrid Maple. There's something beautiful about that drum kit. It's maple with Wingate wood in the middle, and it's just very focused, like Sonar. Sonar Delights are a great drum set, but you hit that tone and it's just pure, and it's got a natural decay, and it just sounds beautiful. I love that drum kit. I like the Phoenix drum kits too. I got J.R. Robinson's last Yamaha Phoenix kit, and there's a Gretsch USA Maple. They're great. I'm up to 4 drum kits now, but where do I stop?
You can go as many as you want. I just didn't want to put too much on you.
Yeah, but they're so great, and I just recently got a Noble and Cooley kit, which really surprised me.
Which one, the Horizon kit?
Well, I don't know the brand of it. I just got.
Because I had a Noble Cooley kit for a while. I love Noble Cooley snare drums. I got to tell you, I have one over there, but I've had about 5 Noble Cooley snare drums come through my hands. So.
I've been tracking them all week and all month actually, the Noble and Cooleys. And I have an engineer that works with me exclusively at my studio, and we do all our stuff. He's like, "What are those drums?" And it was just different than anything. They were maple, but they really sound great. So I've been enjoying those. I've just been enjoying collecting, but also using, because like I say, I did like 30 songs this year, plus I did 20 live videos on my channel of me actually playing to my music. Those are live performances. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my original drum parts out and I'm recreating them whatever I'm feeling that day. Some of these songs were written 5 years ago. Sometimes I do better than I recorded. Very seldom, because when I put it on tape or when I actually record it, I'm really happy with everything that I've done, and I never go back and change anything, because I'll beat up my licks. So I'll leave my drum set up for a day afterwards, and I'll go through it, and if I need to change a feel, I will. And once I live with it, it's pretty much there. But then I have to recreate it again live on my channel, so I've been doing that, and that's been fun.
Do you write your stuff out, your drum parts?
I can.
But you don't.
Yeah.
You don't.
When I played in churches, I would write like Kenny Arnonoff.
Wow.
I would write I have a stack this big of worship charts, and I would just go in there and I'd have it down.
You seem like a reader.
Yeah.
Now that I know a little bit about your background, seems like you write things
definitely
out.
a reader.
I always wished I had the ability to do that. Most of my, when you see me doing drum covers, I'm really playing by ear.
Right.
I learn everything by ear, and I don't write anything down.
Yeah.
Except for when I played in church, I would take a lead sheet and basically write some notes on it.
Yeah.
That was about all I was doing.
I nomenclatures, the whole thing. Cymbals, cowbells.
Yeah.
Like when Steve Gadd's book came out of, the transcriptions. His latest thing is Life and Time, and he's got the Asia whole thing out. I can read all that and play all that. So
that's wild. I didn't know that he transcribed it too.
Yeah, he's got all the stuff. Life and Time, Steve Gadd. When you get that, it's a book with all this. His background is green, but there's a transcription book of all the stuff. Chicoria. It's got Samba song in there written out.
Wow.
And I can open up Samba song and say, well, am I going to bite this off and give up a month of my life to do it? I could do it, but what am I going to have to give up to do it? Cause,
I know that's always the choice. Well, Jim,
let's real quick. Let's talk about your favorite top 5 drummers, and I'll talk about mine.
Okay. You want me to talk about my top 5 first?
Yeah.
All right, before we close up, we'll talk about my top 5. This is very hard, and you guys that watch Ask Earl Anything, you all know that. But Danny Serafin is at the top because he was my first influence as a drummer, period. Because we talked about Bill Maxwell today, Bill Maxwell is definitely in there, number 2. Then you have to go to Steve Gadd, of course, who was definitely a huge influence on me. You could tell by the way I tuned my drums and everything else. Jeff Porcaro, because Jeff is Jeff, you know what I mean? And then the last one is really a tough one for me, because you got the Hal Blaine influence for sure. I love the Hal Blaine toms and all that stuff. But I really think Jim Keltner's been an influence on me, a huge influence on me, especially during the Dylan era. I love that. Dylan's Christian era is probably some of my favorite. It is my favorite Bob Dylan music, but some of my favorite Christian music.
Yeah,
too.
Gotta serve somebody.
Yeah,
that's a great one.
Yeah.
It might be the devil or it might be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody.
Amen.
That's
so
right.
Let's hear your 5.
Well, Steve Gadd, first of all, and then Vinny, Dave Weckl, Simon Phillips, and shout out to J.R. Robinson, the great recording guy and my friend from the 80s. Man, he was on so much stuff, and I learned how to play pocket. I learned how to play simple. Listen to all that Lionel Richie stuff and Shaka Khan stuff, and just sitting in and then Carlos Vega. I got to mention Carlos.
Yeah, Vega. Carlos. I happen to know Carlos Vega's nephew.
Oh, do you?
He's a friend of mine, and he's coming. He's trying to get down here in January to hang out. So
that's great.
But
so that's my top 6. But there's so many great ones. They're all so many great drummers. I love all the gospel guys and. That's all great.
There's too many drummers to even talk about, I know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jim, thanks for hanging with me.
Yeah.
And coming down to the studio and saying hi and seeing my little workspace, and maybe someday I'll do that in Kansas City.
Why don't you come to Kansas City? We'll eat barbecue and you can see my studio.
I'd love to do that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Earl. Appreciate it.
Jim.